Hello, Marc-Antoine.
Hello, Frode. How are you?
Oh, I'm a bit rushed. I'm a bit late, running behind transportation issue, and my son got train sick, so we had to make a diversion. And there's no coffee, so that's what you're hearing now. Ice in an old coffee to make it fresh.
Yeah, I will probably make one as well soon.
Bad idea. Hang on, I'm just finding myself a seat. Finally, managed to get myself home. And let's see.
Hello, David. Hi, Jim. I don't know if we've met.
Okay, video on. Oh, is it? Oh, it's this. It's this bizarreness of using an iPhone by default now in Zoom. It's very impressive, but it's easy to forget to take one's phone out. Anyway, hello, everyone.
Hi.
And David, you're amongst the stars, as always. Marc-Antoine, you're a bit blurred, as always.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Jim, you're a bit new. Hello. There will be some more people here. Usually I'm on time, not today. And then there will be around 5 minutes past. So the call is recorded. Oh my gosh, Alan has time for us today.
Relations is an interesting topic.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of your absolute keys. So Alan, thanks the gods of Twilio for giving you time today.
Thank you. I'm actually on PTO, but I'm still working. So yeah, everything all at once, as they say.
Oh, have you seen that movie?
I have, yes.
And worth us seeing?
I desired an everything bagel afterwards very much.
Isn't that the joke? Buddha goes to get a bagel. What do you want on it? Make me one with everything?
Highly inappropriate. That would be a Hinduist.
It definitely, it actually figures into the theme or as a plot device, but so it could actually be an extended advertisement for everything bagels.
Oh, cool. Gonna change the light a little bit.
Anyway, thanks for having me.
Uh-huh.
Hello, everyone.
So while we're waiting for people, oh, okay, good. And I mean, it is recorded, so we can start doing basic introductions while we're waiting for a few people. We have a new person joining us. So can you hear us? I can see only your profile picture because I can't pronounce your name, and I would like to know how to do that, please.
You mean Strayhorn?
Not Jim, no.
Oh, Betty Bethlehem.
Girma
Hello.
Bethlehem.
Hello.
Yes. Hi. Hello, everyone. Hello.
Hi. Well, yeah, since you have the newest name and the newest face.
Sorry.
And the oldest internet connection.
Yes. So this is Betty from Xlerant. Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. All right.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. This is Betty. And nice to meet you all.
Can you please say your name again?
Bethlehem.
Oh,
Bethlehem.
Bethlehem or Betty. She works with me. She's going to be doing the demo of our tech. I guess I'll do the voiceover of Betty while you're doing it because your audio is not coming out very well.
That would make sense. So that's good. So while we're kind of all gathering here, David, you're going to be doing a little demo, so you don't need to do an introduction. But following my screen, if we can start top left with Marc-Antoine Parent.
Marc-Antoine Parent, hello all.
I'm sorry, I will never say it right, but it's not on purpose. I apologize.
No, it's not a huge deal.
deficiencies.
It's not a huge deal. I correcting, but it's not, it is hard to know how to pronounce names in languages you're not that familiar with. I'm working on a protocol for merging knowledge graphs, so I'm very interested in the topic of relations between concepts, whether they're found in text or elsewhere. It is my personal strong belief that we cannot do this properly without a recursive hypergraph, which I'd be willing to explain to anybody interested. Over.
Marc-Antoine, this is an open day with not a bit, we have a topic, but it may be good if you just start by explaining that now, unless anyone has else something burning since it came up. Is that okay?
Let's finish the round. I have presentations on this, which I could, zoom in on. Let's look at this class diagram. Let's look at this component diagram. That's all useful.
Okay,
but let's do it after the round.
That's absolutely fine. So I'm actually next on the screen. I guess you kind of know me since you're here, but I just wanted to highlight something, and that is, of course, my focus is on future of text. Currently, oh my gosh, it's all about BR. But what I'm really deeply driving for is a deeper literacy. And to enable people to have a deeper literacy, it's got to be the teaching and the learning, but it's also got to be the tools. There's not a lot of focus on tools that enable a deep literacy. So I just wanted to shove that in there today. And then Jim, you're next.
Jim Strayhorn in Silicon Valley, California. I have not listened before, although I had attended 2 of the Future of Text meetings several years ago. Bob Horn and I have been talking, and he and I share similar points of view relative to a graphic approach. So I'm especially interested in hearing further Mark's summary, his brief summary of knowledge graphs. Thank you.
Yeah, that we will definitely get to that. And then I have Alan in the middle. Alan, who is muted. That should be the next.
There we go. Yes, I'm Alan Lloyd. I join when I can. I am, as mentioned before, I work at Twilio. And the interesting, maybe an anecdote there about SMS that you may not know is that SMS actually started out as a way for line operators to send a confirmation message back to the carriers to see if a line was working. So it's this extra little channel that was only meant for technical purposes. And it evolved into what we use today, right? So that's also the kind of thing that I'm interested in, is when we have technology that disrupts or remakes the baseline of what we understand and how that can affect literacy and communication.
Randall.
Hi, my name is Brendel, and I work in interactive computer graphics. The sort of fixation on virtual reality is largely my fault. I've been working on things like virtual reality-based navigation of hypertext through Wikipedia and the generation of text through things like a word processor for the last several years, and I've managed to secure a job inside Apple, looking at things like the future of the web along lines like that. It's, I think, a really exciting venue to look at. A particular interest I have is in extended mind and embodied cognition, looking at some of the more basic attributes of human perception and the way that they can be brought to bear against concepts like relationships, and being able to understand what different sort of corpus of text is alongside other things. I think that there's a really rich vein of things to do there now that we have the ability to present more than just plain characters on screen.
I would go a bit further than that when describing you, Randall, in terms of your ambitions with new and emerging environments, but good starts. And then we have Fabienne.
Hello, everyone. I guess we do the introductions. I'm Fabien, I'm based in Brussels, and I do prototyping, mostly because I want to learn as fast and as efficiently as possible. So that means playing with gadgets and trying things that hopefully others have not tried before, in some cases where it makes sense. And I have a bunch of notes about any kind of topic, but I get frustrated on having it behind a very thin screen. So I just want to move things around, play with it. A lot of it is text, a little bit is video, a little bit of images, but yeah, most of it is text. So the idea is how to play with the text, play with the different ideas, some relating to each other, some mine, some of others, and doing so with the kind of the infinite whiteboard kind of idea, and without having to do it alone, inviting people in it. So yeah, working on this kind of things.
Wonderful. And Bob.
I'm Bob Horn, live in San Francisco. Until recently was 27 years at Stanford University. I'm interested in this topic as a practical theoretician. That is, I have worked on different kinds of structures of connections or relationships between little chunks of information. I think our mind clusters stuff into little clumps. We put them out as chunks of information, some sloppy paragraphs usually, as the English department teaches us. But actually, there's some very important structures that have been developed and still need developing, which is where I've been working on these. I've done that through companies and through working lately with international task forces with large information murals.
Thank you. And moving swiftly on and ignoring anything, Peter.
Yes, hello. How goes it?
Very well. You're supposed to introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Peter Wasilko. I'm an
Oh,
attorney.
hang on a second. Please give me 1 minute. I'm so sorry. But please introduce yourself, Peter, because I know you. I'll have to do something important I'll mention later. Sorry.
Okay, my name is Peter Wasilko. I'm an attorney and programmer, an independent scholar. Primary interest, hypertext, programming language design, end user programming, foresight, and university futures.
Well, with Frode gone, has anybody else not introduced themselves? Please do so.
We just had well, we do have a newcomer, but I don't particularly wish to put them on the spot. Mohammed Nurul. We've just hello to you wherever you are in the world. We have just gone through introducing ourselves. I'm not sure if you've seen these videos before, but yeah, feel free to introduce yourself if you wish.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, Mohammed. We can hear you. Sorry, I had to step out for a second.
Just say where you're from and what you're doing.
If you want to.
Okay. Okay. So I'm from Ethiopia. I'm part of the presence development team. And yeah, that's it.
Sorry, what development team? I didn't hear you so well.
The presence site, the application. So I'm a part of the development team, and currently I'm the lead developer there.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Well, that was very good. So as part of the introductions, we have Betty. I understand that's your shortened name to make it easier for people like me. and David. So if you want to just go straight into your presentation, because I assume that'll include a little bit introduction of who you are, that would be good timing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can keep it to about 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Here we go. So my name is David Benjamin, and I've been thinking about how we can make a web that actually works for humanity so that we're able to not only stop false information and abuse, scams, but also one that enables us to collaborate, coordinate, connect, and communicate at the unprecedented levels that are needed for global challenges. And really early on in that thought stream came the idea of bringing on context to the web, which is all about relationships. So we've been working on Presence for about 2 years right now, and the vision really is a browser or browser protocol that can be adopted by other browsers as well that has context. But it's also a lot more, because it's now become more of the notion of a browser that allows you to have access to a hyperdimensional web. And that additional information is actually enabled by being able to relate computational code to pieces of code relate them to pieces of content on the web page. So I'm gonna show you a little bit of kind of the overview of what we're doing, and then Betty's gonna do a really short demo. And the key thing that we're talking about is making is bridges. And you make a bridge by selecting a piece of text on one page, selecting another piece of text on another page, then you specify what kind of relationship it is. Is it conflicting? Is it supporting? Does it cite? You give a short explanation, so set the category, topic, tag, submit it, and you have submitted a bridge at this point. The next step is for it to go to a validation queue. The validation queue is not to determine whether content A or content B is correct. It could be, you could say content A, content B, or claim and evidence. Actually, I should say claim and evidence. So it's going to validate whether the evidence is related to the claim and the relationship specified. So if the person said it was supporting, is it really supporting? If they said it's contradictory, is it really contradictory? And if the relationship is correct, then the bridge is approved. It will ultimately be minted as an NFT. At the moment, we're not actually minting NFTs, but we are creating bridges. And once bridges are created, they actually self-assemble into a universal knowledge graph. That knowledge graph is available to anyone who has access to the browser. And just to be clear, I say the browser, but I really mean the browser overlay, because right now we're working as an overlay on existing browsers that can be accessed through either an SDK and a proxy server. That's coming soon, but right now we have an extension. So anyone who has access to the extension has access to this entire knowledge graph. And you're on a page, you move your cursor, it's attention trigger. So as you get closer, the content's gonna highlight. It'll show a number, a little badge with a number. That number is the number of pieces of information that are attached to it. And if you click that number, it's going to show you an overview of the relationships, the types of media, and it'll give you a list of the matching ones. You can click on supporting, and it will just show you the supporting ones here. You click on image as well, and it will just show you the supporting images, ones that are supporting bridges with images involved. So you can bridge from text to image, segment of a video, segment of audio, a lot of different uses for this. So one is seeing context for the information, one is discerning what's true and what's not, but you can also organize all your content together. You can connect research, like new information to existing information, text to videos, to video segments that make sense, photos to text. You can share deep links with context. You can interact in context with people around specific pieces of information. One of the most important things is having a united map or a united shared view, unified shared view that all collaborators can see of the information. That's not possible on the web right now. So Betty, let's go into the demo. Share your screen, please.
That was nice and rapid and clear. Thank you very much. Look forward to the demo bit. There's a lot of things we can discuss here, I think.
Betty, are you with us? Mohammed, Betty seems to have dropped off. Could you do a demo of bridging, please? You at the backup.
Are you the third backup, David?
You know, I was, but
Hello,
okay.
can you
Oh,
hear me?
there we go. Okay. Okay, so Mohammed's gonna go ahead and select a piece of text. This is from an article on CNN. As they select it, this is the claim. They can click build a bridge. Now they go to another page, a related page, and select another piece of text, or it could actually be, you know, a photo or whatever. But so we selected some evidence. Now click next.
It's a definition. That's not evidence.
What's that? Okay, I'll just go for it. Defining, at this point, we're going to define the relationship. So they're going to pick contradicted by, I guess. You can cite, you can support it. So hit next, you can see this reflected down there below. Now you can summarize, you know, just put in claim, or, oh, okay. Energy is qualitative. Okay, so what they're going to do is doing a one sentence description of the claim, and now a one sentence description of the evidence. This is going to assemble into an explanation that has a certain format that, and you'll see in a second. We're doing it quickly, so it doesn't have actually the way you might do it a little differently if it was taking more time. But it's a public bridge. Let's go ahead and just select a category. Doesn't matter, just go ahead and select one and then put in a tag. Put it in tag, please, energy. And now hit next. And you'll see that so here's the explanation up the top. Edition, energy, editioncnn.com, at edition.cnn.com, energy is qualitative property is contradicted by the evidence from Wikipedia. And like I said, we might put a little bit more thought in these summaries if we took more time, but you can also see the visual representation of the bridge where it shows both pieces of the content, and the red arrow meaning contradicting, and you see the energy tag. So we can go ahead and create the bridge. Go ahead. Yep, let's create the bridge. And now could you go to the back end, the validation queue? Right now, the bridge is not, well, actually, hold up. Actually, okay, this is what happens now. Go ahead and unselect the piece of text on the page. Like click on the page somewhere else on the page. Okay, so okay, just move away so they can see that it's not highlighted. Okay, now move back up. Okay, as you move your cursor, you see close to it, you see it pops up, shows the highlight. Now click the one and it will show you the bridge, but it hasn't been validated yet. So if you go to the validation queue at this point, okay, showing you that bridge is, it's kind of in a pending state right now. It should say pending here because it has not been validated. If you go to validation queue really quickly, Mohammed. Are you going to the validation
It's
queue?
annoying with that bar, isn't it? Sorry about that. You can drag it down if you need. Okay.
All right, can you go to the, okay.
Instead of
Just
looking at
write
the
it down.
validation, maybe we skip to the bit where other people can see or access the bridges.
Mohammed,
you should be
is
able to
there-
use Control T to make a new tab as well.
Or you can click and drag on the mutes or any of those to move the whole bar down.
Just click the whole, just, when the bar pops up, just pull it down. Okay, all right. So basically, we're going to go to a validation queue where approved validators will have access to this. You need two consecutive, you need two approvals without a denial. And if there's a denial, then it will then go to another queue where it's gonna take a closer look and have someone who's kind of a higher level validator take a look at it, because it sounds like it's controversial. And at the moment, we're going to be doing this by hand and trying to understand where the controversies are, and then.
But
in the
David, sorry to interrupt, but we're running a bit low on time. It's been 10 minutes so far.
Oh, okay. Well, let's move on then.
It's good that you explained the validation process, absolutely. But if we can just look at the access and kind of use, that would be great.
Can Betty? Can you show that they want to see the different bridges? They want to see. Just show them on the screen. Go to a page with a bridge that's active, that's not this one. Is there another one?
Okay. Yeah.
You know what? That one would now be active, and that it would show up just like it showed, except if there was multiple bridges, it would show a bigger number. We're just coming out right now, so it might be hard for us to find exactly where all these other bridges. Okay, so there's 27 bridges, so they're showing the different ones right now. I think we can move on and for any, if there's any discussion or questions. So, Mohammed, let's stop sharing and just. Okay.
So I'm glad you did that demo at the beginning, because it does highlight a ton of issues. This is in many ways going back to Bunny Verbush's trails. And it includes the notion of link types, of course. And I'm wondering if I'm just going to throw the microphone to Marc-Antoine, who after his initial comments will discuss what he was talking about earlier, but I'm sure you have some thoughts on this.
Oh, David and I had discussed this a bit, but I'm trying to, I think it's extremely important to have this kind of work connecting pieces of text together. And with typed links, that's certainly, we can discuss the typed link ontology. I think that what I'm trying to build personally is something much more complex than that. And I think I can argue why it's necessary, but I see Bob has a question, and maybe, do you want to ask your question first? I know Frodo passed me the milk, but I have a long diatribe, and maybe let's get shorter things out of the way.
I'm happy to listen to your diatribe. My only comment was that this notion of that David has been working on is the latest in 20 years of experiments with argumentation analysis and argumentation mapping. And it omits a considerable amount of theory and practice that has already been in place. So I'm wondering if he's aware of any of that literature and of other current projects that are going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not actually trying to replicate the full stack of argumentation, logic, and in this, I'm really more focused on providing context and a platform that allows other people to build distributed applications on top of it that need to have access to a meta layer on top of the web. So I've already had conversations with Jamie, for example, at Society Library, and also Nick Adams at Public Editor, about how our platform could be useful for them to actually expose the argumentation data that they're creating on their destination sites that very few people go to. So we see this as a way of enabling other applications and other sites to bring their information to the attention of the user as they're looking at the relevant information.
Yeah. Well, we could have a longer conversation, which I don't want to have now, about what I think is you've stripped context out of argumentation mapping and already, and from just even that part of the important part of the theory, which has to do with backing and warrants in particular. So anyway, please go on to Marc-Antoine.
Hang on, just briefly. Today is not about product demos, but I'm very glad that David is here to throw some real stuff into the ring to help us. So what you brought up there, Bob, if you briefly want to mention what you mean by warrants and so on.
No, I don't. No, I've written about that I wrote that about before the internet, before the World Wide Web even existed. And it's in a book called Mapping Hypertext.
Yeah, it's right
which
there.
Is, and you'll find it in chapter 7 or 8 or something like that. I can send it to people. It's available. It's also available for download free from the Internet Archive. Mapping Hypertext. Robert E. Horn is the author.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. I mean, we are a group of people here with specific interest in a lot of areas, but
it's a whole presentation. If people are ignorant of Toulmin's framework, and so I don't necessarily want to do that, today. I could do it, but I don't want to.
No, I understand you
I
don't
want to hear what other people are doing.
Yeah, but I think we should keep carefully to trying to have a discussion going forward and not complaining that people are ignorant of things. We don't all have access to the whole history of everything within our field. So if you have a point to raise, that's wonderful, because Bob, your brain is absolutely massive and wonderful. It'd be really, really nice to hear it as in there are these things, because, David is quite young, coming into this enthusiastically. And I agree with half of what he's doing. I don't understand the other half, which is fine. I hope we can, do it in that vein. I believe Brandel had a comment. Is that before Marc-Antoine? Do you have something? Yeah. Or shall we go into Marc-Antoine land?
I was just going to say it's a really interesting take on. I mean, I presume you're familiar with hypothesis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, because I mean, it obviously has structural similarities with hypothesis, but in a way, it seems to be more opinionated. And I think that's a really interesting thing to do to a tool, is to take it down a further line of opinionation. I found that as I was writing a word processor, that one has to think a little bit more specifically about the specific words in question in order to be able to do this. So I think it's an exciting sort of realm, because my rate of hypothesis so far is that people do use it for this kind of thing, but that it doesn't necessarily have that intrinsically cross-linked nature to the annotation layer. So it's interesting to think about where that takes us.
Oh, great. Mark Antoine is
one
shaking
sug-
his head like crazy. So let's move over to Mark Antoine. Rant on.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. I do understand that David is not interested in the full argumentation system, because argumentation system have their own logic. But on the other hand, I think what we want is to have context for ideas. And that means, in my view, we are speaking about this complex relationship that words, spoken or written, have with ideas. And, you know, this is nothing new. This is the semiotic triangle of reference. You know, there's the word cat, there's the meowing animal out there, and there's the idea of cat in your brain. Or you can have the Peircean version, which is a bit more sophisticated. The original triangle reference is attributed to Ogden, among others. But the notion that this set of words can correspond to many ideas. We use the same words to mean many things, and vice versa. The idea can be designated by many words. So I think it's interesting to attempt, at least, to say not just this contradicts or this may mean the same thing as, and then you get into inferred meaning, possible, like think of dog whistles. When does a sentence mean something else in the mind of some people who have been primed to respond to it in a certain way? It's a kind of code word. Again, there's a superposition and meaning on code words. That's the whole point of a code word. So I think it's really interesting to think about this more complex relationship between different sets of words and ideas. So that's one layer, and that's the lowest layer. And then above that, then you think about, well, a lot of work has been done in entity identification. Okay, you can say this is this person, this is this abstract concept, this is this organization. And then you're saying, well, these people were in certain relationship. So-and-so gave a bribe to so-and-so. So what's the nature of the bribe? What's the giver, the givee, and the gift? So that's three things in relationship. It's not a binary relationship already. And of course, it's against what? What's the quiproquo? Fourth term, at what point, where, and so on. This is why I'm saying hypergraph as opposed to graph, because the classical graph representations are elements and edges. But when you start looking at complex relationship, you're looking at hyperedges. Of course, you can reify your hyperedge into so many edges, but you kind of lose the unity of the object in doing so. And then when you have this situation, well, you can compare. Is this particular situation, did it give rise to this other situation? Is it similar to that situation? Oh, and if you're starting comparing things, or, you know, this is not how I interpret what happened. So my interpretation of a certain set of facts, as compared to your interpretation, I'll say, well, this entity is the same as that entity, but this relation is not the same as that relation. So you're beginning to make comparison edges that talk about the edges. So you need a hypernode that talks about the edges of other hypernodes, because you're talking about things. And this is where I'm speaking of a recursive hypergraph. And so it's a totally different, where's the share screen? So that's the triangle of reference. I just want to show, this is how John Sawa, no, sorry, share, I didn't press the share button. This, and did it work? Are you seeing the John Sawa diagram?
Yes.
What? I'm not
Yes,
hearing.
we are seeing it.
Okay, good. Sorry, normally I have a green line around it. I don't know what's happening. So this is an example of hypotheticals. We have subgraphs. We're saying in this alternate universe where this happens, we expect that to happen. So these are consequences of subgraphs, again, higher level relations. So I think it's, I'm very much pushing, if we're going to represent what people are saying and thinking, that we need something eventually more elaborate than two-way links. That doesn't mean that two-way links are useless. I mean, what David is doing is an extension of the basic hypothesis only identifies one chunk of text. And then you're saying, well, let's put them together. There's other systems that do that. There's the Pundit, notably. One that's been found in history of hypertext is annotation systems. When they get popular, there's on the one hand, a lot of pushback from website authors. It's like, what's all this stuff that you're writing to my page? There's actually been even lawsuits. It's like, hey, you're writing stuff to my page, which is ridiculous because this is a plugin and you can disable the plugin. But ridiculous has never stopped lawsuits, as we know. But I'm just saying, this is not only a long history, but a long history that's a bit fraught. It's still worth doing. It's important to be able to talk about things that someone else says. But what I'm saying is, doing that at some point, you'll need layers of reputation. You'll get disinformation links coming up. How will you rate or compare information? Because wherever there's information that's being listened to, there's disinformation. So I don't have much to show or except a few private projects, unfortunately, because I'm trying to think ahead of these scenarios. Now, that said, there's no question that doing the intermediate steps towards these full complex scenarios is useful. I have been using hypothesis as a component. I could see using Pundit or the other links as component. And something I'm very much trying to do here is thinking about, sorry, I'll give you the full diagram. This is me trying to give a picture of, different domain applications have their own concept data, and we could have services that help, whether by humans validated, or by AI, unify. This thing is saying the same as this thing, or possibly saying the same as this thing. And then you get that organized in a knowledge hub, which represents a community with a globally consistent view. And then you federate those knowledge views, and then you can federate, you can give different layers of reputation. That's what I'm trying to analyze. The distinction between saying, first, are we using the same, are we agreeing on names for identifiers? Like, I'm not speaking about human readable names, but machine readable identifiers, so that we can do a federated query and say, who's talking about this globally? And who's saying this concept is the same as that, which is the next layer, saying, here's an important distinction. And this distinction is useful whether or not you agree with either side of the distinction. And that's a reputation for agreeing on the value of distinctions, not on, truth or goodness. And then we can start doing something which I'm calling epistemic federation, which is saying this thing is believed to be true by some people, believed to be false by other people, believed to be an open question. Here are the arguments, here's the reasons, here's why these people believe that, and give these contextualized view that call back to the federation and federated query to give this global view. So in my kind of very, very high level vision, I'm hoping that any knowledge application, of which there are fortunately many, can at some point be federated, so we can have this higher level universe of discourse. I absolutely do not believe that it will ever be done by a single application, because each application has its own use cases and use case specific idiosyncrasies. And that is a good thing. People interact. Very few people are interested in epistemic reasoning, but people interact within a domain application for this little thing they're doing. And this is where there's a lot of human knowledge, and being able to talk across these things is important. Now, again, there's layers to that cake, but I'm trying to get us to look at a very high cake indeed. And at a very simple level, what we're talking about is distinguishing what is known as a topic. Actually, let me show that first. this is a notion of a topic map. It's something that Jack Park of Topic Quest has introduced to. It's one way to build recursive hypergraphs. So the notion that there's a relation, there's actors which are playing a certain role in the context of that relation. And here's the role type. Actor itself, of course, being a topic, also has a type. But the notion that this can be stacked up, everything's a topic, because everything can be talked about. And that means every link has to be linkable, because that link can also be linkable. And what it could become, basically in simple data architecture, just dealing with text, I'm working on another diagram that works with data. But basically, if you have a text fragment identified in the document, what you're saying, well, that text phrase may be found many times. That's what I'm calling a wordgram here. And there's this many-to-many relationship between that phrase and the topic, which represents the concept. And here's the actor relation you just saw in the topic. But in this text, somebody believes that this text fragment, this instance of this frame in this context, happens to probably be about this topic, as opposed to all the other topics that phrase could be connected to. And this is what we're trying to build here, the topic occurrence saying, well, in context, this probably meant that, as opposed to this or that this phrase could also be known to mean. So that's what the distinctions I'm proposing we think about when we think about relationships, not just the text, but the underlying concepts behind them and the concept behind them. Curious to have Bob's reaction, but this is how I see the problem of relationship between texts. It has to refer to an underlying concept.
Yeah, Bob, my hand is up, but I would very much like to hear if you have a comment on that first.
You.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's headed in the right direction. And there exist probably 8 or 10 different taxonomies that can be plugged into those for now, that you could and subject matters that have been sorted out by those taxonomies that you could then begin testing such a system on. So I'm very encouraged by you're taking on a real challenge and a daunting one, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'd like to talk to you more about it if you want.
With pleasure.
Hello, Patrick. Is it on that or a different topic?
Just maybe a little bit more general, a little bit close to this. I think where you're going with, basically, specifying structures, and then looking at relations and taking the scaffold, and then thinking about, what taxonomy that, to apply to it. I think this is, I agree with the previous speaker that this querent that this is a deep, audacious, and I think the thing that I wonder about here is that then, we're looking at this from a schematic point. The last point, we're looking at this from a schematic point of view. But then on the other hand, is that then, how does the, once the scaffold goes, is put with a taxonomy, then, what's representation of Lexia. And so this kind of really excites me in the way that in the early 2000s, I was doing multivalent essays using the brain's dynamic mind map parabolic browser with coding and multiple levels of linking. This isn't the same thing at all, but in other words, it's just this sort of deep context that I think that you're working on. This is really nice.
Brandel.
this is very, very interesting. One thing that springs to mind is if you know Scott Page, of the sort of computational modeling fame. He really likes to phrase the phrase all models are wrong, but some are useful. I understand the necessity to sort of identify, you know, multi-part relationships and the desire to distinguish linguistically similar but semantically distinct notions of what it is that a cat might be when you're talking about category versus the feline that is biting somebody in Patrick Lichty's no camera profile picture there. But one aspect of it that springs to mind is that sometimes the ambiguities of those things are important to be able to pull back in. Sometimes they are relevant to be able to kind of to recognize and be able to create relationships or views of. And the context in which that is important to do depends very much on a couple of things. Is what the sort of lens of looking at something is under the sort of current circumstances, and to sort of essentially the same though is how much effort they're willing to go to in order to be able to achieve that. So so I wonder about whether it's possible to have degrees of rigor in a system like that in order to be able to do those different jobs. It reminds me of, and this is one of my favorite applications I've ever seen. I've never used it, but I love it, and I sort of teach people by talking about it. So file renaming is, you know, an application list application in most contexts. But if you go to the link there, this how-to geek, it's not an endorsement particularly, but this bulk renaming tool has this dashboard that looks like something out of you know, the space program, because it's for people who need to rename a lot of stuff based on a lot of things, and it's entirely relevant for those particular desires. But the reality of the context in which they're doing it deserves it and demands it. And you know, so people who are renaming file sequences for the benefit of creating footage within stuff. So my sense is that this does a job. I would be really curious about what you think it doesn't do, or where it doesn't go far enough as well.
Okay, first, I think that you're absolutely. I think it's very important to be able to make distinctions when distinctions are necessary. I absolutely agree that asking people to be formal and make distinction at the onset is going to kill any such application from the beginning. So we're speaking about progressive formalization and distinctions on demand. I also agree that most people, when they use a term, use it loosely, and there's a lot of distinctions that they won't be aware of until after you ask them, oh, which one do you mean? Oh, there was a distinction, I didn't think about it. And that's natural, and that's fine. But sometimes a distinction matters, and being able to call people, do you mean this one or this one? And especially evasive politicians, and being able to get answers on this is absolutely fundamental for example, decision-making implications in a democracy, just for example. Now, of course, not everything is that high stake. And so we need to be able to keep things at a certain level of formality, saying, I mean, whatever makes sense to be reading, until somebody misunderstands and asks, pretty much. And that's why best guesses from AI, I'm absolutely terrified of using too much AI in this. It shouldn't be a black box if it's involved in human decision-making and understanding. On the other hand, I kind of know that CAT in Saunders Maclean book is the shorthand for categories and not the same as would be found in a taxonomy handbook, because the context tells me, and I should be able to just not have to worry about it every single time I come across the word cat in either context, and be able to automate that part because it's pretty darn obvious once the context is established.
It's nice.
I don't have. Yes.
No, I was just saying it's nice to hear you highlighting this aspect. just to kind of, for a moment, go in the complete opposite direction. This book, tiny little thing, it's quite wonderful because the premise is that we think we know a lot of stuff, but we don't. And we make up stuff when we're asked questions, just like you said, like think of a tiger jumping over a lion in your head, and you will. And then the question is it jumping from right to left? How many legs can you see? You know, that is only imagined by you upon need. So a lot of human knowledge seems to be, we think we know, but yeah, so I highly recommend this. There's so many illustrations in this book on that point. And then I thought we were going to have a fun, creative argument, but this thing here, language versus reality, it basically says that words are based like landmarks to orient and to coordinate human action. It is, according to this book, language is not about truth. It's not even about communicating necessarily. It is about getting something to happen elsewhere, yourself in the future or someone else. So I find that very provocative. And Mark Anderson, who's not here today because he had something to deal with, he's one of those British people who doesn't talk plainly. It's always very colorful. So it's an example of using language, using specific words in many different ways. So I agree with you, Marc-Antoine, having AI kind of interpret it. But just really briefly, because I can, I'm going to show you what may be the opposite approach to balance a discussion. So this is author. Most of you have seen it. I've shown it to you a billion times, but I want to show you how ridiculously, maybe oversimplified we approach this. So the word metadata, for myself as a student, I want to define it. So I do Command D and I get this dialogue. Oops, hang on, let me delete that. You weren't supposed to see that. Okay. All right, so let's pretend, this is so annoying. I didn't think it saved that. You see that some of the words are bold, right? The words are bold immediately when you write something, like if I write PDF, it's bold. And all that means is that that text also has a definition. So if I now click on PDF, it will load that. Manuscripts, it will load that. So the most ridiculously simple, I won't even call it a knowledge graph, is connected that way. You go to the map, and here you can see without any intelligent layouts, you can see all these relationships going out. If metadata has the word document in it, it becomes a heavy line. If metadata is mentioned by something, it has a light line. And then you can point to the lines to see, oh, my computer's spinning, to see why that has been generated, why that relationship is there. So the point of all that was just to say, you must be horrified, David and Marc-Antoine, because there's hardly anything there. But this is meant to help have little, almost like pins on the wall for the user's own thinking.
I'm not horrified at all. When I said the Federation will have to find knowledge where it lays and in the form it lays in, because somebody will have entered it in a way that makes sense to them for a given task. And the question is, how do we then translate these or put them together and say, okay, maybe that was a link, an unqualified link, which in a way is terrible, but can we find qualified links elsewhere that may enable us to know, oh, this is a part of that, or this is a prerequisite of that, a precondition, or this is a definition for that. And those, the being able to, and then compare, recently been studying Gordon Pask's entailment meshes. These are about groups of words that happen to each be sufficient to define the other one. And it's a great way to look at concepts, seeing these concepts are enough to define this other concept and in any direction.
What is that? What is that called? You spoke a little fast.
Entailment meshes by Gordon Pask, P-A-S-K. And you look for forgot the first name. Pangaro has been a student of Pask who's been elaborating that theory with modern computer tools. Very fascinating.
Can I throw an additional dimension out here, please? And that is, it is really interesting to make a let's just for the shorthand call it a knowledge graph yourself, either for an organization or yourself. It's also interesting to try to do something simple, but what about, we all have records of our work. And one of the things we on and off talk about in this community is finding stuff we've said or done before. Are there any thoughts on how knowledge that happens to be maybe as transcribed from this conversation we're having now should or could relate to something in a more formal system we may be building on the side? Because it seems there's a lot of thinking in different spaces, but it seems currently, at least from my experience, to be relatively siloed. I'd love to hear any thoughts on that. Okay, I'm going to keep talking until someone interrupts me then. So for instance, if I read something Peter has written, what could be an interesting means for me to have a look at his knowledge graph and say, well, actually, I remember Peter said something different earlier, and this
Marc-Antoine is raising his hand in the window rather than with the icon.
I guess
Yeah, sorry.
I will accept that as being valid.
I'm
Speaking
a
of
bit,
different things, meaning
I
different
don't want
things.
this to become a Marc-Antoine monologue, and I hope others interrupt. So that's why I was trying to be, let's see if anybody else has anything to say. But basically, okay, there's many aspects to this. What you showed in Author is your local knowledge graph, right? And it makes perfect sense to say this is your local knowledge graph, and this is the links you have established amongst things you have important to you. And it's important because it's a graded knowledge graph. If we started adding all the other relationships of everyone on the planet, it would be profoundly illegible. We'd get a big ball of hair. And that's why I'm extremely skeptical of, let's connect everything. No. Connect everything is illegible. So what we'll have, what I expect we should be trying to build is to say, here's a local knowledge graph, here's another local knowledge graph. And then we can embed it in, well, here's stuff we know is connected to it. And we could see all these million links, but kind of keep them on the side and say, okay, I'm interested in this one. And then say, okay, here's other coherent, curated views of which this other concept is part of, or these many concepts from the original one plus this new one we're bringing in is part of. So the idea is curated views are always more legible. Automated views are illegible on the face of it, but useful to make the connection, but make them ultra local so that you can use them to wormhole between points of view. And then you can worry about, okay, I have this local, how can I create a meaningful synthesis, which will be a new curated view?
I see Alan has his hand up, but I just wanted to throw the hand grenade out there that, do we really feel, that don't take your hand down. You're next, Alan, just a quick second. Do we really feel that a defined concept is what it says? Do we not agree that whatever we have defined may have a brief basic definition, but it does not capture everything in that user's head, and it does not convey to another user, and not even to that person in the future? So to have a kind of a safe distance from, when we use the word concept, we use it in a really shallow term, right? Yeah, excellent. Okay, Alan, I'll try to shut up.
One second. No, a bit of it. I agree that the written definition does not tell us everything. I think that the point is to be able to compare definitions and to refine definitions by comparing definitions. So at some point, we know, okay, this is important distinction between two versions of these concepts, like highlight where the definitions diverge and why it's important in arguments, when it is, of course.
Well, Lloyd at MIT has a list. He didn't give the definitions, but it has a list of what he says are 50 different meanings of the word complexity. 50 different meanings of the word complexity. Now, someone else is going to make all those definitions and then give us examples of those definitions or not.
Yeah, and the question is, do they, is that the same Lloyd, Seth Lloyd?
Yes, Seth Lloyd, yes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. It makes perfect sense to me. And again, the question is a given distinction relevant for a given conversation? Sometimes it isn't, sometimes it is. And it's in practice for a given argument that you realize, yeah, this matters or not.
Okay, Alan. I'm so sorry about interrupting, please.
Alan.
I appreciate it. And this is not a particular point. It's more of a, this is a general question. Has this been considered? I'll do my best to try to describe it. Everything that I'm hearing has to do with the desire to increase the definition, to increase the specificity. Is there anything around, and I'll come up with a couple of metaphors to try to describe it, a kind of an ML approach, which is rather than saying this is that, it picks up on several dimensions of data to make a prediction. So those dimensions of data act as triangulation points. And I'm wondering, and this is where the thought experiment comes in, would it be at all valuable, not practical, this is absolutely, but would it at all be valuable if instead of saying, what I'm saying is a part of this and it can be defined in these different ways, versus, so instead of doing that, saying something like, I'm quickly associating with what I just wrote with yellow, with fast car, and with cloud. Things that are seemingly totally nonsensical to the content itself, but by triangulating random associations in a personal graph, has there been any work done around, and that was perhaps too extreme of an example, but any work around abstracting your own impulse to classify and instead grab what is nearest at hand to be used later? Does that make any sense at all? Poorly phrased, I apologize.
Are you speaking about abstraction or about neighborhood? Because these are distinct concepts, and I think you're trying to associate them. I don't yet see how. No.
I'm conflating two things, right? Yeah, so there's some abstraction that's involved, but there's also kind of the human impulse to say, I don't know what it is. I don't have total clarity about the domain space or my feelings from day to day. And if that was like baked into a system of knowledge management where that was actually the kind of strength, and you identified, several random domains at the moment, kind of a what is it called, Rorschach test, right? For anything. Is there any work and any studies around that kind of, or that family or neighborhood of approaches?
Okay, now I understand. And I would say yes. I think a lot of us, a lot of people who are working on tools for thoughts, like think of the Roam-like applications, sometimes they are just asking you to name a concept by putting it between brackets. And the concept does not have to be well defined, and it's well adapted to emergent concepts. And in particular, someone who used to come to these meetings, Yuri Lejos, was very much working on a kind of Romish outline application that was specialized for, oh, this is something you said about this in this context and that context, and it's an emergent concept, so it's not fully defined, but here are still connections between it. And I think that's very important, to be able to speak about things that you don't have a clear handle on yet, because of course, not everything is well defined. We are redefining things all the time. I know when I'm talking, at some point I'll say, oh, I'm calling it this one. Oh, no, actually, let me use this name for that concept. And it makes reuse across my own notes very difficult, because I keep renaming concepts as I discover new concepts I need to name. That's a reality.
Well, I think you said something very important there, and I really would like to hear what the group has to talk about. The issue, you said not all concepts are well defined. I take it further. I'll say that no concepts are well defined, but that's not a bad thing. That is the world, that is nature, that is human. And the work that we are doing here is not to be, let's put it this way, nerds, although we all are, I believe. It's not to try to be nerds and put everything in a box. That is not what we're doing. But we're trying to figure out how to have mental and systematic scaffolding to make sense of our own thoughts and to help communicate with other people. That's what we're doing, right? So if we really highlight, surface, whatever fancy current word we want to use, the ineffability of knowledge, what are the thoughts of the group on we still carry on and it's still useful?
I would say I agree partly. I had a bit of a, yeah, well, in mathematics, we're doing a bit better than that, but that's not the common topic. But there's enough concepts that are well-defined enough until they're not, right? What's a human? Well, did humanity begin with the big explosion of symbolic thought 10,000 years ago, or does it begin with Homo sapiens a bit earlier than that, for example? But it's for the purpose of a given question, right? If I'm just saying we are humans versus AI, that's a well understood distinction for this context. And the distinction about pre-modern, like Homo sapiens, non-Homo sapiens, sapiens, is not terribly relevant in that case. It's relevant in another case, and it's important in another case. If it's real, it's argued. But I think it's important to have a compendium of important distinctions around the concept so that we can ask ourselves, need I worry about this when I'm having this conversation? And having a kind of point of reference, these are the distinctions that might be useful when discussing that topic. And this is why we're having conversations, to hone our intuitions, to make our concepts better, more precise, more well-defined, and to communicate, and sometimes to justify. And I see where the author of that book was going, but there's many reasons that have been posited to be, why did language appear? Self-justification has been posited as a good one, which I find interesting in this concept of fair justice, possibly. What do I know?
I see Patrick I see Patrick has his hand up, but Marc-Antoine, if we can also think a little bit about our the definitions here. We use the term concept for a lot of different things. And maybe that's something we can also discuss. But Patrick, please.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this notion of ineffability and context. And so, say for example, sometimes I'm wondering whether this could be possibly linked to the Kantian notion of the sublime in regards to, in regards to semantics, and then we take that forward into contemporary notions of Mortonian hyperobjects. In other words, so say for example, when you wind up with something that is possibly more easily distinguishable, more distinct to something, when you get to something till you get to the point where Steve Kurtz is talking about indeterminacy, in which it's something that is so encompassing and so complex and that sort of thing. The idea of being able to make these sort of distinctions gets challenged from a discursive perspective. And then the thing is that then how do we wind up working with these, almost sort of like Eames-ish, powers of 10, and then how do we deal with the issues of as we go up exponentially in semantics? I'm being a little bit poetic. How do we wind up dealing with this idea of distinction?
How do we end up dealing with this idea of distinction? That's really good. Sorry, my wife brought me another book for another point. Anyone have any comments on that? I think that's a really, really good question. How did we end up dealing with the ideas of distinction?
Well, Spencer Brown had wrote a book called Laws of Form, which gets right down to the basic logics of it. If you want to start there, I'd rather, I won't describe it, but I once tried to make a cartoon introduction to it, which I'd be happy to share with anybody who wants to see it.
Yeah,
I would love
please.
to.
If you have a link or want to share it, that would be great.
With this I will. I'd be happy to, and I don't have a link, but I'd be happy to put it in the repository that you were suggesting a few minutes ago, Frode, which it's of course my name is repository, but yours will probably have a different name for where do we put, or where can we access, and where do we put some of these half-baked ideas, some of these approaches which we've been seeing today, which I don't know, I've seen 6 or 7 of them. I have no idea how to get to them.
Okay, that's a fantastic question, and I have my personal answer to that, and I'm absolutely open to any and all other personal answers. We have this journal in our community. I know you know, Bob, but for the wider group. And the journal is supposed to be roughly monthly. What we do, at least for the guest speaker, have that transcribed, put it in, a few other links and so on. The initial idea was that the journal would also do exactly what you're talking about, Bob.
Good, yes.
Yeah, so it's about, if you want to write an article, make it academic and spell check every word, go ahead. But if you want to write a paragraph that you couldn't be bothered with caps lock not working and your R key is broken, it's absolutely fine too. It is about putting in a record that is citable, and it is both in HTML, PDF, and the original author format, because the author format has all kinds of JSON files inside it, so Brandl can do magic with it. So if you have something you want to distribute to the community, send it to me. If you are a Mac user and if you want to use my software author, that'd be great. If you use Microsoft Word, that would be just fine. If you use anything else, please convert it to Word, because otherwise there will be formatting issues. We'll have to go back and forth. So
I would certainly hope, I would urge others in the community who've offered things today to send those today. This can be a wonderful thing, and thank you very much for hosting it. We need it. We need it desperately.
yeah, we do need a few themed discussions. I mean, we meet every Monday and Friday, a few of us, random who was here, but these discussions are for the far distant future. We've had over 100 of these. We had less of the monthly ones, of course, I think about 6. But the books we're making together also, it is important for the future. And I don't think, I'm certainly no genius. You may be a genius, but honestly, we just don't know. That is why it's so important to try to record our interactions, our thoughts in a manner that other people can access and get something useful, or learn that a lot of stuff we talk about was silly, either way. But on the notion of division, here is my current book that I'm reading. I think it's quite amazing. Karen Armstrong, Sacred Nature. It's not very big. The text is actually very large as well. And I think it's really central to our discussion, both for how information connects and also to VR and also to text. Because the basic premise of the book is that before current Christianity, and Karen Armstrong was a nun, she became an atheist, then she became a freelance monotheist, was written on the world's major religions. This woman has deep scholarly knowledge. She's absolutely wonderful. Met her a few times, an absolute privilege. And she says here that before modern Christianity, modern meaning mostly when Christianity went to Europe, societies looked at the world as being holy, not holy being in a cloud pointing down. And what she says now is, back then there was mythos and logos. So now we have logos taking over the world. Logos is fine. Logo gives us technology. Logos is almost equated to logic, obviously. But we need mythos. And she says mythos is not telling a bad story to a child. She says mythos is a different state to do understanding. It's basically what today we might call art, theater, music, and so on. So in a time where we're completely destroying our planet, where I'm sitting in a continent that is at war. Absolute insanities are going on, plus, plus, plus. We need not only to talk logic. There was another book on, I can't remember it now, I'm so sorry, but on the tyranny of reason. We had the tyranny of the king, and then we had the tyranny of reason. The Vietnam War, McNamara did all these body counts and all these things, and it was very logical to put the bombs here or there. But logic isn't all we need. And the reason I'm giving you this long speech is with VR, particularly, despite the fact that it takes us entirely out of the world, I think has an incredible opportunity to also open ourselves up to the world and to each other. But it can't do that with just dots being connected. And I don't think anyone in this room is saying that. So that's why I would really like to hear thoughts of how do we get more of a shared understanding and a shared respect out of how knowledge and people connect. Good timing with a hand there, Marketone.
First, full agreement. It's not, except on the VR bit. It's not all logic. We connect at, of course, an embodied knowledge level. We connect at the storytelling level. And for me, the mythos level, storytelling is fundamental to mythos. I've been following Snowden of Cognitive Edge for a long time, and he's been saying how fundamental story is for mutual understanding. Recently, probably many of you are aware of the book, How Minds Change. It's pop science-y in tone, but it's talking about very interesting research about getting people basically to share stories to open up their epistemology. Like if you're not trying to tell someone that they're wrong, but you're saying, okay, what do you believe and why? What is your story that led you to believe that? And here's what I believe, and here's my story for believing that. And I'm not trying to say I'm right or wrong, but sharing stories as epistemic background totally changes the conversation and totally allows a degree of openness. Not every time, of course, not foolproof, but it certainly works much better than the alternative of, you know, here's all the reasons why you're wrong. And however, and I'm focusing on the ability to represent more subtle and complex points, which is analytical. I do believe that analytical and synthetic and narrative and mythological need to be intertwined deeply, deeply, deeply. But I want to do the back and forth between them. And I know we've had in some ways a surfeit of logic, but it's a surfeit of logic that is kind of freewheeling. And yeah, connecting the logic to the stories is also important, but that means making it very explicit. Why do I believe that? Which is part of the higher level relations, why I'm interested in higher level relations. Because for me, the understanding how the story correlates to the belief is part of those higher level relations I want to be able to understand. Over.
I've been struggling with that for the last 20 years in the making of the information murals that I make, because those are intended both to capture at least one framework or scaffolding of a larger nature, of larger forces, let's say in historical and future possibilities, as well as because they're murals on the wall, you can walk up to them and see small chunks of text which contain detail and also contain, you know, what I've said in this group many times, many times. I don't think I remember you being around, Mark, when I've said it, several hundred meanings for arrows that connect the text and shape the of this. Now, and so I want to ask Frode, if you're there, Frode, does your journal accept a whole book?
Yeah, no, it absolutely put that in there. So I took the camera off because I'm looking for the book I mentioned earlier, and so it's a bit disruptive, but I'm definitely here. And yes, if you want to make
Okay.
something big and or short, doesn't matter as long as it's not owned by someone else, obviously. So perfect.
Yeah, well, I will then send the aforementioned Laws of Form cartoon book, which I'll never publish, but and it may be wrong. It may be slightly wrong. It was edited once by a friend of mine, but who knew the original. So anyway, I think one of the things that it's useful has been useful for me is to be able to identify some, with very rough edges, some domains of thinking together and discussion. We started, and I'll say one of the things that I started out with, it turned out to be the domain of what I call, and many people now call, relatively stable subject matter, the kinds of subject matter that occurs in textbooks and also occurs in industry, in government, in procedures, policies, documentation, technical writing, and training. It's relatively stable. I call it relatively stable because it's stable until the organization changes or the engineer changes something. But that's a whole domain which is well established at this point. The domain that was mentioned earlier, very early, by David, which is the domain of arguing, which is an error or disputing, which is another area which has been rather well described and can be addressed. And that's one of the things that in a certain, those are just two of many, that establish a context that we're in, that enable us to make distinctions more readily and communicate more easily. So I don't know how we would do that in conversations like this, to say unless we came up with a small loose taxonomy of those kinds of domains. And then I can say, I'm talking about the domain of relatively stable subject matter, and then I can talk about concepts. I can talk endlessly about concepts because it was one of the fundamental elements of 40 elements of what was developed for relatively stable subject matter. And we can make very clear, very clear enough distinctions that hundreds of thousands of people have paid money to learn it. Let's put it that way.
That's very useful and good, Bob. And I also think we should have a discussion on different kinds of applications, like was mentioned earlier, because definitely stable concept, and then there are things we're trying to figure out together. But if I see you have your hand up.
Sorry, we've gone a little bit of distance between point A and point B. Could you restate what you're wondering about regarding VR, because immersion is one of my specialties. So
wait, are you asking me, or are you talking about?
I'm asking you. I'm asking you. In other words, what was your thesis that you put forth? In other words, it's blurring a little bit, and I want to answer it.
Yeah. So the thing, and this is also talking to Mark Antoine, who didn't seem too enthused on VR. So I'll do it in a few stages. First stage.
Okay. I'll just say in answering this is that I just look at VR in one aspect of immersion, and so the thing is that this is kind of my frame. So go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So the thing is, for many years working on the future of text, it's been rectangle. Let's stick what we have. That's text. I couldn't deal with it when people wanted to add pictures and stuff, because of course that's fine, but that's something else. Let's be honest to text. I then deliver my thesis. Brandel says there's such a thing as VR. I say, yeah, I know, but what do you mean? He did all kinds of brainwashing on the group, and most of us now have Oculuses, which I don't use very often, and I don't have a problem with that. The aspects of it is, first of all, I believe that within 5 years at the longest, most people will have a headset that'll be easy put on like they have a smartphone. To me, that is a given.
Right.
If people don't agree, that's fine, but I take that as a given to start with. Now, when it comes to the specifics of your question,
Right.
different media opens us up and closes us up in different ways. I guess
Mhm.
McLuhan would have a field day with this, right?
Sure.
You could say that my Apple Watch, which beeps every time something happens, ties me
Yeah.
down to my work or to other people. But it
Mhm.
also gives me the freedom to leave the house without even having a phone. So when it comes to VR, I have a sense that even though it is all encompassing, shuts us off, it can help us experience in new ways. So that two things may happen. Number one, when you do your work, you're working in a much more fulfilling, rich information environment, which maps onto cognitive processes better, like literally walking through a forest, which is how we grew up over the last 200,000 years. So it's not
Mhm.
sitting in a sterile box room. There are so many things that Brendel and Fabienne and others in the community has talked about. That is
Sure.
absolutely amazing. I think the one thing that'll help us think and do stuff, but it'll also say, I'm been productive, done all of this stuff, just enough, and you just go for a walk. I think a lot of things will happen. It'll isolate us and connect us, but only if we in the community of people who give a monkeys about knowledge work look at this, because Apple, and I'm an Apple fanboy, I'll admit it, and Google and Meta will produce products for their own revenue. Nothing wrong with that. That is how we get the hardware, but
They
that
sure
is
will.
their lifeblood. We have a different need. And if we come together as a community, write in our journal, have these meetings, others can read and cite and agree and disagree, maybe there will be an effect on the infrastructures and solutions that'll help us do this.
So I think what I'm getting at is that a couple of things is that on one hand, we go back to, the regime of affordances, and what we're dealing with. In other words, we're assuming that there's going to be this thing that we have on our head that creates the sensorial replacement for the real world. And so the thing is that my scholarship is in VR, AR, XR. But the thing is that the thing that I think is interesting, so like from the regime of knowledge construction, I like going back to Perspective View with Steve Holtzman, and then also Noodlebox, with Noodlebox and Perspective View, in other words, like the idea of making knowledge molecules and that sort of thing as a haptic interface, with Roy Stringer and was it Danny Brown, I think, and that sort of thing. So this stuff these experiments in the 90s that were based off of Nelson in the beginning, Xanadu, that I think this stuff is super interesting. Now the thing is that how do we deal with this in regards to the set of affordances that we apply them to? In other words, and then the other thing is that if we have like the headset, and then we're dealing with this information space, sort of like Holtzman, like the Perspective View, that's one thing, or if we spatialize the brain or liquid or whatnot and that sort of thing. But then the thing is that we still have this you're walking in one space, but the thing is your cat's in front of your feet and that your cat is not in that space. And there's this dissonance. Now, the thing is that when Apple comes out with its glasses, that could be either fully immersive or AR, XR. And the thing is, I like to make a difference between AR and XR because I find them having a bit of a difference, XR being closer to VR. So the thing is, then we get into the annotative. So in other words, we're looking at how this information integrates itself into into the environment around me, which I think is actually much richer and much more interesting. And then going back over to Bob, for a while I was experimenting doing Jacquard tapestries and doing dynamic AR displays going into them as and patent pending, as information displays within the human environment. So the thing is that what happens to me is that not necessarily personally, I think isolating headsets are onerous. I don't have an Oculus 2. I have an entire closet full of the damn things from like 2003. But I mean, what happens is that back to IO glasses and things like that. I've loved this stuff, but the whole thing is to me, I think in many ways, I think actually the idea of having the metaverse and meta and all that sort of thing is to basically try to create a neoliberal scrim between the objective world and the body, basically for the matter of as a Deleuzian control regime, of the first world. But the thing is that I think to bring it back together, I think what is probably much more likely is something that is that incorporates either more or less of the real world and allowing us to pop into V space and that sort of thing. But I still think, this idea of being in this space and dealing with information in this space, whether it's a plane or whether it's, I loved the HoloLens, as I had a HoloLens. I love the fact that I was using my entire room as a desktop. I personally, I think that's a plausible future. Anyway, I'll shut up.
Okay, well, I see Brandel has his hand up and he's going to say some amazingly interesting thing because he's an expert on this too. But just really briefly, I see no difference between AR and VR because I think hardware so soon it'll be perfect pass through. You will switch as you need. So there is a difference, but I just see that the development will be there. But when it comes to our topic of information relationships, if you do your AR and you're sitting in your home office and you have this wall, this, and so on, then you go to your office and you have the same kind of stuff slightly differently mapped onto the wall. That in itself, as terms of memory palace and all that stuff, becomes a very interesting issue of relationships, just what we might call spatial hypertext, but in a 3D space. So the issues that are coming up are going to be profound and deep, and they are about relationships. Brando, I will shut up again.
So I agree. I think that that it's less to do with AR or VR or MR or even whether it's head-mounted. Actually, so Humane Technology is releasing a video today. It's maybe already out. That's a company that has many ex-Apple folks and is maybe making a chest-mounted projection-based system for mixed reality of some kind, which I think is really interesting. I've got this little projector I've been playing with, being able to kind of have a grid follow you around. So being able to put stuff so that if you use it like a magic flashlight, so that if you project on that door there, then there's always a particular thing, and then if you project there, then there's a persistent window at a world. So I think there's a number of ways of mediating it, but I think that the major point for me is that if you look back at the way that knowledge work and information manipulation happened before the predominating, like the dominating sort of function of computers and the sort of the poverty of real estate that we devote to it based on the fact that it's been expensive to drive CRT screens and stuff like that. If you look at Frode's back wall there, he's got all of those books. People who do writing often will have a large number of, they'll have a cork board, they'll have actual lines that they string up along their back wall with folded pieces of paper that indicate plot points that they're able to rearrange and move around. I think that the role of space in our ability to reason about information, and Bob's murals, as he's very kindly put up in the back, benefit from this greatly. As he said, that one is not that's a mega flu pandemic, not the NIREX one, but the NIREX one, you have in a very, very large form factor at NIREX in the UK, sort of 20 feet long, something like that. And the benefits are manifest because of the mechanisms of our bodies being in spaces, understanding things, and being able to kind of reason about where things go, being such a hardwired capability that we simply haven't been able to make use of. So it's been practically unthinkable what the benefits of having a space for thinking in will be, given the fact that we've decided that a 32-inch screen is sort of profligacy and large in a way that many people don't have the stomach for. But in fact, if you have an entire space that is able to be updated and refreshed. Like Frode's bookshelf is amazing. Mark's is amazing. Alan's is a solid contender there as well. But it's only one particular view. It only has, and it relies, very heavily on you knowing enough about those books and enough about the arrangement to be able to kind of make use of it as a close at hand thing. If you could arrange those books in different arrangements on the basis of a specific relevance of a topic, that's transformative, And so what I've done in my personal work, what I think is, I'm not sure what that one is, Patrick.
That's my bookshelf.
Oh, yes, but there are
And it's
benefits,
huge.
definitely.
You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, no, I mean, I have I've had an ebook reader since the first time I could get my hands on the sort of the first version that
Yeah,
I could get
but
out of a weird Chinese market.
I was involved with a project called Project Alexandria that Geert Lovink was involved in, and it's wound up with almost 400 gigabytes worth of of scholarly PDFs. I mean, basically almost like downloading LibGen, and I'm just like, so I'm saying I think it's very interesting to see, to see the library, but then also on the other hand, it's, I have one too. I think, the book is very important, but also on the other hand, is like, I don't have an apartment building big enough to hold what's in this hard drive.
Yeah, absolutely. But
Yeah.
and so I'm not saying that we return to a fixed spatial representation of these things. What I'm saying is that there are functions that having the ability to devote space and position in meaningful ways to those things it confers significant benefit. And I also talk about kitchens and woodwork. You have tools in places, and that often the grip of the tool, this is a Wacom stylus, gives you specific reminders of how to wield those things in those particular places. I feel like augmented and virtual reality, all of these kinds of things allow the potential for having our bodies and our environments kind of remind us of what it is that we want to do, that effectively the lenses that we want to put on. I often talk about, fancy Leicas as having a certain weight against your chest, that giving you a sense of what it is that you're intended to do with it. We don't have any of those abilities with wielding Photoshop or Maya or Blender at this point. And so my sense is that virtual reality is the first foray into being able to take computing out of these boxes and being able to make sure that the things that are meaningful to us in terms of our hand gestures, in terms of our gaze, all of those maybe our physical, like our visual affect, those things being having the capacity to be relevant for the purposes of computing, I think is the transformative thing. And this is a long project, but this is the start.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is one of the reasons why I wish I could have afforded a HoloLens 2, but it's one of the reasons why I loved having a HoloLens 1. And, it's like in talking with, Erin Manning, who's a partner of Brian Masumi, is that, about her, about actually their, discussion at the Sense Lab, up at Concordia and UCAM. I don't know whether Brian's gone emeritus or not yet, but, this idea of embodiment and movement as thought, and there's like the idea of haptic cognition, that they have. And I love this, from having, and this is linked to what I think you're talking about, and what I was talking about, with these spatial, with these spatial interfaces, that people like Holtzman started getting at, and yeah. And I think this is exactly right. But the other thing that I wonder about in the intermediate term is the idea of, how a regime of knowledge is structured, and as something that the rank and file person who's gotten used to, an interface regime deals with it, and how it goes to the next structure. In other words, most people are used to this idea of, the mouse, keyboard, monitor, that sort of thing. And the thing is that when I put on the HoloLens, I just went boom, okay, I loved it, and to me this makes sense. But on the other hand, I would give to somebody and they, what do I do with this? And then I just go, and the menu opens up, and the start menu opens up, and I said, what the hell just happened? And, that's my point. And
But you
that's
should-
almost like watching that's almost I show my students the mother of all demos with Engelbart in 68, and they're just sitting there kind of bored saying, what the hell is that? I said, that's Google Docs in 1968.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden they're just looking at me like, livestock in the lights of a semi. And, some of them just getting, and they're just going like, what the hell am I looking at? And,
Well,
but
this is very much the issue we have now, the question of, what is this and what we're looking at?
Yeah.
And, one of the issues is clearly integration, because you put on the headset and then you got to do this, that, and the other to get to any of your work. It's really
Yeah.
disconnected. The Apple headset won't do that. So that'll be one of the reasons there'll be an insane, huge leap forward for anything. Like right
I
now,
agree.
I'm on the laptop with you. I'll put that on. I'll still be on my laptop, but I can then have as many screens as I want or non-screens. But also the room space is so important, because there has been attributes of somebody saying AR is better and VR and all of that. The whole point in VR is that you can choose. If you want to write in a completely darkened room with a fireplace in the corner, you can do that. Snap your fingers and you're in an AR environment of your own room with different lighting. Snap your fingers again and you're in a forest. That is going to be really, really interesting. And we don't have the infrastructures for that yet. But also in terms of connecting you with reality, one of the things we talked in this group the other day was about how, a lot of us have Ring doorbells or something similar. We have some kind of cameras. Imagine if you can have that in fake windows in your workspace, you will feel a connection with different spaces that are real, that we don't get because our laptop screens are too small and it won't fit. Bob, you have a big mural behind you. Would you like to highlight something?
Excuse me, I didn't have my hand up.
I know.
I just decided that I would put up some of these, and I'm gonna have to put up more of them. This 15 years ago, I had a project that New Scientist magazine in the UK supported. And one of the elements of it had to do with the precautionary principle as it was being applied to the environment. And one of the elements of the precautionary principle is that we should, what debates were arguments about whether we should, if there were dangers that could be anticipated and known about, should we take action now to prevent the advance of science in that direction? And so I got to thinking about, well, what don't we know? And how graphically on a mural, because I work in murals with large syntheses, and I made two different murals. This one happens to be one that portrays what we do not know about ocean ecology. And it uses a metaphor of scientists in swimsuits swimming around in the deep dark ocean, which gets dark very fast, and shining their little flashlights on various objects, which appear as statements about what we don't know. And it's organized in a various fashion. I don't remember exactly how we organized it, but it was based on several articles that appeared in Science and Nature and other such journals. So it's on my website. There are two of them, both of they're what I call a class of knowledge. Again, we're talking about domains of knowledge. We could make a mural of what we do not know about how to relate information. We could make that. Now, it would be wrongish to some degree, and be rightish to some degree. but it would be helpful to an enormous degree.
I think, Bob, we should absolutely consider doing that. And two things as we're getting towards closing. Number one, we're going to be in Estonia, my wife and I and my son, from next week, but I'm going to try to be online Monday, not Friday, because it's a wedding. And if you want to continue this conversation on Monday, along the lines of whether literally or just conversationally doing what Bob says of trying to map our ignorance around connecting knowledge, that would be useful. So please consider that. And then I want to throw a bit of a sentence in there. This is the kind of thing, anyway, just say it. I believe that the most profound thing a human can do is to choose where to look from. What I mean by that can be informationally, visually. It can mean if you're having an argument, look from the other person's perspective, of course. It can mean looking at things in many different ways and many different means. That to me is a very spiritual perspective, and having a 5-year-old son, trying to bring him up, trying to explain this to him, he actually gets that other people have minds. He actually gets that when he's in an argument, he needs to try to understand the other child, which makes me very happy. But we don't do that as adults in a general sense. And a project I've been working on for a while is to take the big 5 personality traits and map them onto where in the brain they seem to register, and also where they seem to fit political leanings. And of course, it's a mess, but it is interesting because if we're going to try to talk to different people who have different senses of openness, for instance, you know, we need to better map how that fits to each other. And if we do that along what Bob is talking about, the more objective kind of connections of knowledge to how the different brains, like Marc-Antoine was talking about, how he doesn't think in terms of room layouts. In terms of our relationship, my relationship with Marc-Antoine, that is a useful piece of knowledge. You know, we see things differently. But that is why I'm so excited by VR, because a lot of VR will be shit. A lot of VR will be a waste of time. You know, that's the rule that 90% of everything in any field is awful. What is that? Sturgeon's law? Is that what it is? Whose law is it?
How long, if I send you the, I will send you the cartoon book of distinctions. How fast can you get it up on the web?
I will put it up on our lab website today. I will put it up. Let's have a look at our lab website together, actually, real briefly.
Yes, I don't think I've seen it. Have I? I've
So-
seen a bunch of your websites. I don't know if I've seen this one.
Here I posted that thing on Facebook and hardly any discussion, but there you go. That's what friends are for, right? To ignore us. So future text lab.info. I have to balance what is public and what is not. We've had some great things in the community, some things that are boring to other people. So on top here, we have a link to the journal, which then basically says, no, it's not here. The journal is on Future Text Publishing. I'm trying to keep these things very separate now. So here you can go, Bob, Omar, etc. You can see them all, download them in different formats. The what you're talking about now, I would say, comes under community. So here's our community. We have a chat log where all the chats from all our discussions are entered. So all the links and everything is available from all our discussions. We have a VR resource page, which is designed when you have your Oculus or whatever on your head, click on this, and then everything people have done in the community can instantly click. Where should we put that, Bob?
Oh, I don't know. You'll have to decide. You know the framework. I mean, it's hard to see frameworks just from clicking down a page like that. You know, I have not formed a mental model of the framework, of the structures or you know, that you have
Do you have a
developed there.
Fair
Do
enough.
you
So-
have a category for mental models or logic? I mean, this is what it's about.
No, I
Uh,
don't, because that's not really the way hang on, let me just see here.
you can choose your own keywords or tags.
Oh, no, absolutely, but it's not really what the site is for. Hey, categories, here we go. So under categories, we had discussion, but there just wasn't much. We did have a circle community, which I'm still paying for because there's still a few things up there, but the community just didn't seem to take on that. And not a lot of people want to add to, so I'm the only one who really adds to this. So it's not really a community page, it's more, this is what the community has done kind of a record. So I'm guessing
So it's
maybe,
it could be a resource.
yeah, it could be a resource. Absolutely. I didn't mean to update that. Let's view that. Where was it here? View. So these are the kind of things. Yeah, let's just make it now. Do you want to send me the link right now, Bob?
I don't have a link. I have to find it in my own file here and
That's
and
fine.
see how big it is and whether I send it to you by a Dropbox or if I can just send it as an attachment.
That's fine.
Let's see, miscellaneous.
Brandel, I'm reading your last comment here, and yeah, no, that will be really interesting. There's so many dimensions to this. Yes, dynamic land, kind of, exactly.
Dynamic land is a really interesting mix of computational resources and real world. I really like what's happening in there.
Yes, I'm fascinated by it. Somewhat disappointed that I was never able to get to see it in its full force in Oakland. But looking forward to.
Yes.
We had Omar Rizwan on recently, and he said that who worked with Brett at Dynamic Land for a few years. He said that the concepts are still alive. They're just being applied in a more directed context, which I was always sensitive to the lack of application of the project, and so hopefully that will fare it well in terms of being able to kind of connect from one great concept to the next. Something that terrifies me no end is brilliant ideas with inadequate bridges from here to there, because it takes other people. It means that you can do so much with it, but then you don't get to do the next bit. So
I wonder if we'll see steps away from screens before we see fully realized VR, meaning not just projectors, but like I mentioned in there, kind of like Dynamic Land or things that are almost holographic in a sense that you can just fit onto any space that you have and say, like, this is now a panel that I want to throw stuff onto.
My sense with that is that it comes back to Moore's law being not a force of nature but a force of economics, and that people have to see reasons for things in order for them to pursue the sort of the cheapenings and the economies of scale that come from it. So I'm not aware of with photovoltaics what the timeline is for the specific advancements, but I imagine that they were in large part spurred by people realizing that they should make them cheaper. So if people feel like plasma displays or large LCDs are as cheap as they need to be right now, then we won't see that until people start to say, hey, if we could make them 10 times cheaper, we could sell 20 times more. And so, yeah, I see that as being a necessary part of communities like this, frankly, to be able to say, if you couldn't paper my entire room with pixels, I will pay you for it, So people need to have something to do with those pixels in order for somebody to print the money to authorize the R&D.
Rhoda, the Laws of Form book is on its way to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Attached to an email.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Actually, it has arrived. Does anyone know Eduardo Koch? He does.
Yeah.
There was just a mention of holographic work. You're saying yes, Patrick?
Eduardo Katz?
Yeah.
Yeah. Over in Chicago, sure.
Yeah, I just got an introduction. Vint Cerf said we should talk to him, so that was interesting. It was just one mentioned holographic sides of things too.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think we need to step it up a bit, because we are all, I don't know about all of your politics, it's none of my business, but in this type of environment, we are all kind of leftist, and historically leftists are crap at organizing. You know, right-wing people more do this and do that. And, you know, that's one of those big five personality issues. But also looking at military, you know, most of you know that we're hosting a Ukrainian family of absolutely wonderful people. And, you know, over dinner 2 days ago, what did they tell us? Ukrainian army has taken over their homes because it's now a battlefield. They have to live there. And then America, what are you doing? Sending HIMARS. It's absolutely fantastic. At least 4 is in country, more are coming. Why are they so amazing? Range plus drones. And of course, that's why this is relevant to this discussion. You got to find out what the problem is, and you got to find out how to deal with it. That's what it all comes down to. You know, Doug Engelbart used the language of augmenting our capacity to understand and deal with complex problems. We have climate change, we have wars. I think the discussion we've had today, and with the brains here, we can somehow make a contribution. Most of it will be messy chats, but I'm really grateful for your involvement in this. And I hope that more and more of it will sneak into that journal, which will then be part of the 3rd annual Future of Text book. I hope that someone will read it over the next year or 100 years, find something that stimulates them because they violently agree or disagree, it doesn't matter. But they will go and do something with this shit. Because what really got my antenna up to the ignorance in our species, and I'm using, even though Bob, I talked earlier about that word, is Future of Text in California a few years ago. I don't think you remember, maybe you remember, Bob, I think you were there at the Moore Foundation. We had a breakout sessions, like one group should talk about links. And this was Silicon Valley, great minds. Nobody had any idea. You know, and me and my teacher mode said, what about links to different destinations? What about typed links? What about backlinks? What about linked databases? What about link analysis, right? Nothing. So when you talk today, Bob, about trying to map out our ignorances, and let's use that word, it's quite provocative. Why don't we use it, right?
Yeah.
Would you want to put you can put the 2 murals on the web, maybe to inspire people. I can send those to you as well. If you want those in the journal.
Yeah, please, look, whatever you want in the journal will go in the journal.
Okay, great.
Please send it. And we're over time, really not good to take people's time more than invested. It's already 2 hours. Is there appetite to continue this on Monday?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, for me.
I'll be.
I don't know what that means.
Yes.
Is that a yes? Or is it a
Pass.
French Canadian maybe, or hands and icons are just such a part of this. It's very cool. Anyway, guys, have a safe and lovely weekend. Thank you so much for today. And if there is something any of you want to have in the journal, just send it.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye all.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.